All right, friends, we are in the home stretch of this little series on the tarot card meanings and ruminations and meditations and thoughts. And for those of you that have watched all of these, thank you. This is a big one. This was a request, and I had never really thought about doing something like this before because I feel like, it's so big, and kind of who cares what I think. But I'm glad that it has been interesting for some folks. It's been interesting for me. I think this is something maybe everyone should do. Talking through their feelings about the majors, or the whole deck. There are things I hadn't thought about in talking about them in sequence for the first time in ages. So, next up is the Star. And the Star is a card that, again, like the High Priestess, I don't always get excited about seeing in a reading because its meaning is kind of vague to me. And in fact, I do not see the Star come up in readings frequently, but it does. Now, I have very divergent meanings on this card. Anyway, so this is Prisma Visions, Raven's Prophecy, Shadowscapes. So I think the Star can represent like wishfulness, peacefulness, dreaminess. There's that quality of kind of having time to lie down on the ground and look up at the night sky. Or as in the Raven's Prophecy, this sort of looking, out over the hill at the city below. It's very Van Gogh. I love that card. So there's that. Now, then there's like this star quality, this sense of succeeding and of being viewed as very good at what you do and becoming known for what you do. So being literally a star, whether it's in a performance or a performative way or some other way. You can be a star in the field of, I don't know, microbiology, say. Whatever it is, in that sense, you become kind of the quintessence of that field. So there's that. And then there's being like a diva, or being wishy-washy and unfocused and sort of like overly romantic, overly dreamy. So this card goes in three really different directions for me. There's an element too about this being a guidepost or guidance or a signpost, something that shows you where to go, thinking about the Star of the Bethlehem or the second star to the right, So there's a lot with this card. And I had to really sit down and think about this card recently to think about what I was going to say about it. And I thought I didn't have much to say. And then I thought, I have too much to say because the way that I feel about this card is so divergent. So for all of those things I just said, there's the dreaminess, the hopefulness, the quietness, the romance. This card paired with the Lovers may make me think of a relationship, of a romantic relationship. So there's that quality. There's that quality, like I said, of looking up at the stars, pondering life's existence. There's that quality. There's the star quality of being the best at something or being a success at something. The Peter Pan quality of never growing up. The diva quality. The guidepost quality. And then all of the worst of that, like not having get direction, not having a guidepost. Being unknown in a field, not being able to connect to or find time to look at the stars, all of that. So, yeah, I think I thought I didn't have a lot to say about this one, and I have so many things for this one that it really becomes, again, so based like the High Priestess on context. What's around it? Is the Lovers around it? Then I'm thinking romance. Is the Six of Wands around it? Then I'm thinking a creative success, a star, an actress, a award winner. If the Five of Wands is around it, then I'm getting that Peter Pan quality. If the Moon is around it, I may be getting that Diva quality. So it is, to me, one of those cards that's really so ephemeral that it really is influenced so much by what's around it. But that's the Star. The Moon goes in many directions for me as well. I did not have an easy time choosing Moon cards, in part because many of them are very similar. And in part because I don't always like them. Ellis, Line-Strider, Margareta Peterson, Moon, obviously it's the Moon, and obviously it's the Waite-Smith, Fountain Tarot, and Wild Unknown. The Moon, for me, again, can be many, many things, and it's these watery cards, that are so influenced by the other elements. And the Moon is a very watery card. The High Priestess is a very watery card. My Moon card is so water damaged, you can't probably really tell, but I think that's interesting. Because they need other cards, because water will go wherever you let it, and so you need other cards to give it a path. Otherwise, it'll just flood everything. It becomes like the Pool of Tears in Alice in Wonderland, right? So it is so influenced by what's around it. So the Moon, to me, can be instinct. It can be intuition. It can be animal instinct. The Moon, to me, can be illusions. The Moon is reflected light. So it's not a direct light source. It reflects the sun's light. So we're not quite seeing things as they really are. We're seeing an interpretation of them, an illusion of them. We shouldn't normally be seeing them, and we're not seeing everything, and we're not seeing everything exactly as it is. There's like a masquerade quality to it in that way. So you get that. Then there's this lure, this pull, this attraction. The Moon attracts because it does influence water. It influences the tides, right? So then there's a seductive quality to the Moon, and partnered with the High Priestess, another very watery card, and another very fluid card. It can be a very powerful, and yet difficult to describe, difficult to control kind of energy to it. A very magical quality in that way. Yes, being drawn into mystery, mysterious experiences, dreams, theater, definitely theater, playing a role, enacting a role. Phases. So the Moon can indicate phases of things, cycles of things. If the Moon and the Wheel of Fortune come together, we know that we're talking about phases and cycles. So it's something what's happening right now is impermanent. If the Wheel of Fortune and the Moon show up in a relationship reading, even if things are good, it's not necessarily permanent. It may be a very passionate, very hot, especially if there's a lot of Wands cards, very hot relationship, but it's going to burn out quickly. It's going to cycle through more quickly. So then we also get into the shadow of the shadow. It's a shadowy card, right? So the shadows of the Moon are very, very dark. Lies, deceit, inability to see, being false in order to deceive or fool others, lack of instinct or not finding our intuition. The Moon in a shadow aspect can represent those times when we're not reading well, if we're readers, tarot readers, and an ability to connect with our intuition, with our instinct. Paired with the Devil, paired with the High Priestess or the Magician, or even the Tower, this may be a very sexualized animal relationship, you know what I mean? Very explosive, very erotic. So there can be that in there too, because it is so tidal. So there's the Moon. I never really thought about the sun card as being ugly until I watched one of Kelly from The Truth and Story, one of her videos about how she hates this creepy baby on sun cards. And I thought, oh yeah, there's something weird about it. And then the sun card also makes me. I don't even know if the website's still up anymore. Sadly, I went to look for it recently. The tarot collector Holly Volley, I think that was how you pronounced it, had the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot page, and she had done all this research about all the editions and iterations of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. And the sun card was an example she was used because of this little squiggle next to the number, which she called the oh shit line, which is probably the 22nd ray. But it always made me laugh when I saw it. I picked a really diverse array here, actually. So this is the Ellis. This is Tarot of the Trees. And this may be my favorite. It's the Prisma Visions. It's such an artist card. Love it. The sun is the opposite, not the opposite. Well, yeah, the opposite of the moon in that it's direct light. And so when we're seeing the sun in a reading, we're seeing what really is. You know, if we have the moon in the center of a reading, if things are radiating off of it, we have to question whether what we're seeing is real. When the sun is in the middle of a reading, or when it's, you know, exhibiting a lot of force in a reading, we know that what we're seeing is real. And it's going to, you know, because it is such direct bright light, it would overpower the moon in a way, in a reading, because we can't see the moon when the sun's out. And so that's good and bad. You know, the moon is about illusions and shadows, but it's also fantasy and theater. The sun can be very useful, you know, because we want to see things as they are, but it can also destroy our illusions about things, you know. And to use a very trite example, you may, you know, be flirting with someone in the bar and like, let's go back to my place. And then the lights come on and you're like, oh God, you know what I mean? So that could be a part of the sun showing up in a reading too, is suddenly seeing things. But, you know, the sun is pretty literal in terms of these allegories and these archetypes. It is light. It is warmth. It is success. It is seeing things as they are, feeling the glow, feeling the joy, the change of seasons from winter into spring, joy, you know, possibility, all those things that we associate with, you know, the sun. So it's warmth. It's generative. It's allowing for us to see reality. We can, in the, you know, it's interesting to talk about the shadow side of the sun, right? But the shadow side of the sun is almost the opposite of a shadow side. We can be blinded by the light, feel too much heat. We can get burnt, feeling the pressure, feeling overwhelmed by possibility, feeling like the spotlight is too hot, like we didn't know what we were getting into, or having our illusions shattered. You know, I remember reading a book, and I think it may have been one of Janina Renee's books, or Christine Jetty's books. I can't remember which one. I think it was Christina Jetty's professional tarot book, even, where she talks about how sometimes a reading that tells people like it is can be really damaging because their illusions are how they've survived. And I've seen that happen in, not with tarot readings. I don't think I've ever given a reading that destroyed someone's illusions, but I've watched people have moments of realization where their illusions and their protections have been shattered. Oh, I forgot one. Have been shattered, and that can be really destructive. You know, most people can have a revelation or a realization and recover from it, but some people can't. And so in there, the sun can be, you know, damaging. You know, we can get sun damage if we don't wear sunglasses, if we don't put on our SPF, you know, 50. So there is some negative shadow aspects to the sun. This is the Margareta Peterson. 2 more to go, you guys. I can't believe it. So, Judgment. What have we got? This is the Prisma Visions. Big fan of this. Shadowscapes, Fountain, Wild Unknown. The sun makes it possible for revelations. And the Judgment card is one. And so, the pairing of the sun and Judgment in a reading could very well be a great awakening, a great revelation, an epiphany. This card itself is an epiphany, but compared with this, combined with the sun, it can be a really large revelation. I think of my Bible stories as a child, and was it Saul or Paul who got thrown off the horse and saw God or saw the revelation? The two of those cards combined can be really, really, explosive, for good or bad. But it is an awakening. It's a revelation. It's an epiphany. It's a wake-up call, an eruption of sound, a new lease, a new leaf, a restoration, a rolling away of the stone, a resurrection. So, it can be a healing, or again, it can be a warning. It depends on what's around it. The devil card in front of this or near it may say, you're not listening to this warning and you're going to get fucked, so to speak. So, in combination, that can be that. With the moon, it can be just a reminder to get out of bed early. But, it is an awakening. It is a moment. I don't tend to think of it as a judgment. Again, like it's the final judgment, I think, allegorically, where the sinners are separated from the believers, and that makes me unhappy and uncomfortable. But it is Pamela Coleman Smith gave us, and Arthur Edward Waite gave us a resurrection. James R. Eads gives us this sort of open door into this, terra incognita, so to speak. These in the Fountain Tower are rising from shrouds. It took me a while to figure out what that was, because it feels very Lily-esque. There's a like migration quality with the Wild Unknown, but it is very much that. And its shadow side is an avoidance of that, or resisting an epiphany, resisting an awakening, a refusal to hear a wake-up call, silence, stillness, deafness, even, emotional deafness, because I don't really believe in literal interpretations for the most part of the majors, because they are larger than that. So that's Judgment. And then we come to the ultimate from the penultimate, and we get the world. And the world is a uniting of, in my opinion. Prisma Visions, Tarot of Trees, Raven's Prophecy, that Dutch deck, Lion Strider. I don't interpret this card as having a shadow side. To be honest with you, it is the one card in the deck that I let break that rule. The shadow side of this card, I think, is a slowed or delayed inevitability of it. But the card is, the Fool, as I said earlier, exists pre-gender, and the rest of the tarot majors split those genders up and identify the genders. The world reunites them, and so it is a uniting of, a culmination of. I'm reading this book. I talked about this in the first video. This is Tarot History, Mystery, and Lore. I got a very used, worn copy of it very cheaply recently. But I found this picture in it, and this is an alchemical detail. It says it's from Robert Flood's 1617 book depicting Anima Mundi, or the world soul, believed by the Neoplatonists to link the mind of God. I'm just going to read this because I can't see it. To link the mind of God and the material world. The concentric rings depict the many layers into which Neoplatonists' theory divided their universe, encompassing every imaginable phenomenon from the spheres beyond the planets to the mineral and the crust of the earth. So I feel like this alchemical Neoplatonic image is what we're talking about here. It's anima mundi. It's the world soul. It is the breath of life. It is the coming together. It is everything. And that's a bit impractical to make sense in a reading, but it is big, you know what I mean? In this card, I think we have the best that we get in life, and that's one reason why I don't necessarily read a shadow aspect of it. I'm just looking for I put my journal aside now. I can't find my notes on that card. It's the culmination of a journey. It's the release of spirit. It's the climax. It's the orgasm. It's the coming together. It's all good things. Yeah, I mean, it really does bring together all the elements. It brings together growth. It brings together harmony. It brings together so much. So it is everything. And so in a reading, we do have to get a bit cliche, because it is, it's the best you can get. It's having the whole world on a plate. It's just, it's a really good influence. It's sort of what we strive for. But the tarot is a cycle. And so like anything else, we're going to come back now to the Fool, and we're going to go through the process again. It would be interesting. It's interesting that there are majors only decks, and some people will read with majors only readings, and people do obviously path working and meditation with the majors. But when I talked about the wands, the suit of wands, I talked about how that suit is so dependent on the others to ground it and sustain it. Otherwise it'll burn out. And I feel like the major arcana needs the minor arcana to make it make sense and make it comprehensible and make it relatable. It colors readings much strongly than the minors do. But without the minors, it's sort of incomprehensible. I mean, so many of the theories that we talked about, like this one, or like death, or like temperance, or, the high priestess, they are so ephemeral. They can be so, it's trying to imagine like the deficit, the national deficit. Like, I don't know what it is, or if there is, a number on it, but, libertarians certainly get really obsessed about the deficit. Like, what does $13 trillion actually look like? It's an inconceivable number, because we'll never see that much money. Most of us will, I think even the wealthiest people will never see that much. So what does that look like? So what does the world look like? So in that way, we need the minors in order to make 13 trillion something imaginable, something conceivable, something that makes sense, and that can be, and that has a relevance. And the minors need the majors to make us inspired and feel like, there is something, bigger than we are. And to remind us that the struggles that we experience are archetypal and universal and common and yes, large, but also shared. And, I guess I'm getting a bit philosophical with this stuff, but they need each other, in a way. The majors need the minors to ground them. The minors need the majors to lift them up and make them feel worth thinking about, you know what I mean? So that is, for the moment, my walkthrough of the 78 cards in the tarot deck. I hope that this has been useful. Now I can get into a couple other requests that I've had for demos of a couple spreads. One of the things that came up while I was doing this was how elemental questions, like relationship questions, work with suits that are in other elements. So how the elements work together. One thing I was thinking about as I was going through this, I started talking about how cards are influenced by the ones that are around them. So maybe a video on that. But for now, I think some NyQuil and some sleepy times is what's in order. So again, I really hope this was useful, interesting, helpful. Be good, be kind. Let me know, what you're feeling, how you're doing, and if you have any requests, any thoughts, I look forward to hearing them. Talk to you soon.